Welcome to Conversations with Cheryl Weston. And I'm really excited about our program. It's talking about a subject that is possibly coming to Omaha, but also that is very important in this day and time in order to make sure that there are things that are being taken place for how to address racial um, compensation or responses to different things that they would like to see done regarding very activities that exist in our society right now, such as injustice, housing injustice, racial injustice, various programs and those types of things. And I'm excited about bringing my guest on today, who are with the Redress Movement. And we're going to talk about that. What is the Redress Movement? And just to give a little background, I would like to start out with discussing some of the things that we'll be talking about today. And we'll bring each one of our guests in. I see John's on board, and I believe Ms. Hall will be coming on shortly. But I wanted to give our audience some of this background about the redress movement and how this particular redress movement started. And also, it goes back that this isn't the first time there's been a redress movement. And it actually started back in after World War II, where it started with the Japanese Americans who were put in confinement during the World War II and the compensation that they received. And there were these organizations that came together and got the passage of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. And so that's not long ago that these things happened. And unfortunately, it's still happening. But this is the way to address some of those issues. Back in the 1988, when the Civil Liberties Act was initiated, it was the federal law that granted reparations to Japanese Americans who had been wrongly interned by the United States government during World War II, and to discourage the occurrence of similar injustice and violations of civil liberties in the future. I would have to say, maybe it's a little personal, maybe it's a little biased, but they have certainly failed to take care of that action. It has not discouraged and it hasn't gone away. But what we want to talk about today is the redress movement. And as I said, I have John, who is on with me right now, and will be Ms. Hall will be joining us, I believe, shortly. But the redress movement that John is involved in initially started in response, and you can correct me if there's something that I don't have right, in response to Richard Rothstein's book, The Color of Law. And it documented the intentional laws and covenants and process that created housing segregation, along with other types of truths, coupled with participation of 20 million Americans of all races and ethnics in the spring and summer of 2020. This movement was created to redress those racial segregations, if possible, to take the necessary steps to organize and help. So in response to this book, a group of national civil rights leaders, convened by Ted Shaw, the former president of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and director of the Center for Civil Rights at the University of North Carolina, decided to create an organization to take on redressing racial segregation. And so I think there shortly after came on Mr. John as And I see you got a different hat on today, John.
I
He always wears the hat. And I guess I really should have let everyone know we're about to get some of that old Isaac Hayes voice. When I but John P. Comer, hopefully I pronounced that last name correctly,
Right,
is a
right.
senior organizer, and he has 20 years of experience around housing and criminal justice issues. He has organized in various cities across the country where he's built neighborhood associate organizations from the ground up by empowering the residents. And this is something I really feel so strongly about personally, is that we need to empower our residents. We need to empower the people of the communities. That is how you are going to make a difference. Um, and so he has designed and implemented grassroots strategies to restore voting rights to formerly incarcerated individuals in Maryland, as well as creating the outreach model for public housing residents who had endured years of harassment from maintenance staff. And this led to a $9 million settlement for more than 40 residents across the city. So I say thumbs up and kudos to you, John, for that. I mean, you were on it. You got it. And I'm going to well, before we do that, I want to bring in Miss Hall, who is the new director, executive director for the movement. I think there she comes. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
So wanted to bring her in, but John, before we give her a few minutes to kind of bring herself in and introduce and what she would like to see accomplished, if you can give a little more background as what is the point of and what's the purpose of being an organizer and how important it is to this movement.
Sure. Um, I'll try not to be too long because I definitely want
Yes, I do know you
Kashana.
will be long, but I'll interrupt you.
So, so you know the importance of being an organizer is, at this point in time in my career is to organize the organizers, so that we can actually create a larger movement than what we might be doing now. And I think that there are numbers of organizers in Black communities across the country, and it's very important for uh, someone to come in and try to implement a strategy that everyone can get behind
Mhm.
for the purpose of redress. Uh, and that may involve folks from other communities as well, right? Like that want to see redress uh, for and understand how we got to this point in society today through redlining and
Right.
many of the things that are mentioned in the color of law.
John, you're not just only focusing on the housing, but some of the other underlying issues that create the problem and the need for redress movement. Would that be a correct statement?
Well, so we definitely are focusing on housing. I
Mhm.
would just say that we have an understanding that there are so many other social ills that are tied to redlining and some of the things that happen to where our communities are where they are, like food deserts and
Mhm.
things of that nature.
And another thing I'd like to make sure clarify for the audience, there are several other locations where are the redress movements now currently.
Yeah, so Denver, Colorado, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as well as some digital organizing that are reaching in places where we don't have an actual organizer working every day on the ground. And we're looking to expand in the future, and that's more of a conversation for Kashana.
Okay. Um, and one of the other quick things as an organizer, that organizer, as you said, you're organizer to organize the organizers, but the the local organizer is on the ground all the time in the various cities, and you're there to assist them with that.
Yeah, so I travel. I'm based out of Baltimore. I'm in Baltimore right now, but
Mm-hmm.
I travel a lot, maybe up to 50%. Maybe sometimes it seems like it's been more of my time being extra hands and helping out our organizers on the ground, helping with the planning. And, in Milwaukee, we're in the process of potentially getting a win legislatively. And that's been a pretty long road, a long fight. So hopefully we can wrap that up before the new year comes. But we have a number of different campaigns going on in those cities.
Okay. All right. And I forgot to mention, because I always gotta make sure we get this out. John is a graduate of North Carolina Central University, because
That's
we
right.
got historical colleges here, people
That's right.
representing them. And it's I would have to give Prime Time his kudos, because he has uplifted the ideal of the Black historical colleges. And so, just to bring in, I want to introduce everyone to our audience to the new director of executive director, Miss Kashana Hill, and I hope I got your name correct, will assume the role she has of becoming the executive director for the Redress Movement. And she is serving as one of the most active fair housing advocacy groups in the country. She's had background from Louisiana, Fair Housing Action. She led a team working there, housing policies and practices through litigation, policy advocacy, community-based educational offerings, and other direct services to the community. And as an advocate leader, and litigator with personal connections to the impacts of residential segregation and housing policy, her work will be including to get community engagement processes for the city of New Orleans. She was involved in that. The First Nation under a 2015 rule requiring state and local governments to identify and address barriers to fair housing choice. And I'm not going to forget, because I'm going to get it out right now, also a graduate of, got to give that credit. Hey, our Black historical colleges, we produce the top. She is a graduate of Spelman College and also Tulane University Law School. So welcome to the program, Conversations with Cheryl Weston. I'm so happy you were able to make it. And I know you're quite busy, so we'll get into time. But I wanted to give you, before we start addressing some of the issues and questions I'd like to hear from, what your comments are, and how do you feel about in your role that you feel that you're going to step into as this new executive director, how you would like to see this program advance.
Well, I want to say first, thank you so much for having me here today, Ms. Cheryl. I'm really excited to be able to join you and my colleague, John, and talk a little bit more about this exciting work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you mentioned, I have had a lot of involvement in terms of community-based engagement around issues of fair housing and access, right? Equitable access to housing. So I have, for the past 20 years, been litigating fair housing cases and working to ensure equitable access to housing. And so I've done that work for a majority of my life in the Deep South, and feel very blessed to have had the opportunity to work in communities across the Deep South. And so I'm really looking forward to bringing that expertise and that grounding, right, to this work. And so I think what feels very important for me is to continue to be a part of, and I hope that the redress movement will be a big part of, continuing to expand the conversation about housing justice in this country. And one of the things that I often tell folks when I'm engaging in community is that I chose to do this work because it has always been clear to me that all of the ongoing inequities that we all care so deeply about across this country, whether we're talking about inequities in health outcomes, whether we're talking about educational inequities, whether we're talking about inequities in our criminal legal system, all of those inequities have their roots in our country's history of racist and discriminatory housing policy. And that history has never been fully discussed, and it has certainly never been addressed really at any large scale level. And so I'm really excited to be here with the redress movement because that specifically is our work, right? Making sure that these issues are brought to light and that communities are equipped and prepared to fight to have this history of racist housing policy addressed in those communities.
I think it as John and I have had several conversations during his visits here to Omaha. And I think that is what is so great about this movement for me. I'm the type that I put myself in very personal into what I'm doing. And I think of these things. And I think it's so great that now we have something that is addressing that particular, because we're here in Omaha, Nebraska. Now, we're not the Deep South, but the things that go on, you think we was in the Deep South, because we got racism, we got segregation, we have resegregated our public schools because we made them, and we did it by doing it through neighborhood schools. And now we have one of the worst public school systems, so segregation is still alive here in Omaha, Nebraska. And unfortunately, one of the titles that we have held has been, we were one of the most racist cities in the city's top 50 cities. And that included the segregation housing problem. Right now, if someone came into Omaha, Nebraska, and they were a person of color, many times, unless you're at that very top level, you're going to be not outright, but focused to a certain area. And, it's coded. If you're Black, it's going to be North. If you Latino, it's going to be South. So, it's still very much there, but they are ways to, as I say, code it to North Omaha and South Omaha. And the way that, and this just gets me, and every time I have a chance, I make sure that I say it, is how here in Omaha, years ago, they put a hotel right down the middle of the connecting from North and South. And now all of that area that is south of Cummings, and I can't think of probably go to Leavenworth, St. Mary, somewhere right there. Okay, that's north. It's called NoDo, North Downtown. So what they've done is, you ain't in North Omaha, you just downtown Omaha, and to get away from it. But I'm very excited about, hopefully the redress movement will be coming to Omaha, Nebraska. I'm not going to be an organizer. John, I already told you, I'm not applying for that job.
That's
you
okay.
already are. You done put in your time. You'll never not be an organizer. So.
Well,
that's right. We'll let you use whatever title you like, but we know you have already been doing the work.
Well, thank you for that. It's something I feel very strongly, and one of the reasons why I remain in North Omaha, because it is so. My camera guy, he's supposed to have set this up. So now we may have a little technology, because that's not my field, but he said he got it in. So I'm going to try to do this, following his steps here. Because what I wanted to do was to bring up your website, because there's some things on there that I would like, and both of you, whoever feels like they want to answer it, that's fine. I'm not going to put it in, because your program, your organization, and I don't. So if this works, all righty. Hey, so far, so good. He told me, now, Miss Weston, you don't have to be afraid. Just it'll be okay. And I'm like, you sure? So hopefully I've got the screen up and that
It's,
is it? Okay, our audience can see, because
Yep, we can see it.
one thing I wanted to talk about, we've already talked about the book and the reason why this started, but something I'd like for you to, as we talk here, and I think it's important for people to understand, the redress movement is not just Black folks, because I went on your website and I checked out some of the people. What would you say? I know we've got here the print of what the redress movement, but what would be your short definition of the redress movement in your own words?
So, what I would say is that the redress movement is doing the work of ensuring that folks understand the history of segregation, not only nationally, but in their specific communities. I do want to say that one thing that I know that John and our organizers have been seeing across the country is that oftentimes communities even are split in terms of the level of knowledge and understanding they have around segregation. And I'll tell you that in my own experience in doing this work here in New Orleans, very often Black folks that I'm working in community with have a deep understanding of the segregation in their communities and are very clear about segregation and the ways in which they have been harmed by discriminatory housing policy. We also are seeing that sometimes in many communities, folks who are interested in engaging but who may be white have less of an understanding and a knowledge base around these policies, right? And the ways in which these policies have shaped their communities. And so we definitely want to be clear that we are hoping to ensure shared understandings, right? In terms of the history of segregation within communities. So doing the education work is a critical aspect of the redress movement's mission. And then we also hope to make sure that we are organizing and engaging and mobilizing folks so that we can work to identify and seek, right, policies and other outcomes that actually do remediate and address the harms caused by residential segregation. John, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, but please do feel free.
You know, I was in such a agreement and listening to you, Miss Cheryl. I forgot the question. Can you ask me the question?
I was just saying, I put on the screen there what your website says the redress movement is, but I was wondering if you would like to, in your own words, say what you felt like what the redress movement is or about.
Yeah. So, just to echo Kashana on the education piece, like that's big. And I must say, and I think this is worth me saying, the book The Color of Law is a powerful tool for a lot of folks who are not in the know. I've been in the room where Richard Rothstein was presenting to a room full of white realtors. And, that understanding wasn't there when they came in the room. And there was a great understanding when they left the room. And you saw so many people and heard so many people saying, I didn't know that. What can we do? And that's pretty much how the redress movement came together, off of people receiving information that may speak to years of propaganda for folks to think otherwise about how communities got to where they gotten to. But, it really awakens people and then allows for some good organizing to happen, and for the reason of redress.
Okay. The other, I was really impressed with when as I have here, hopefully on the screen, is the justice. What about your values? And I would like, if you could, I know it says we believe that justice is always the center of the work we do, but what do you both consider? What is justice?
So I think justice involves acknowledgement, right?
Mhm.
I think a lot about the ways in which our experiences have been denied,
Mhm.
and the ways in which communities have been led to believe that they've done something wrong. We hear sometimes talking points around social engineering. Oh well, if we expand access and change zoning to allow multifamily housing or affordable housing built in wealthy neighborhoods, then that's social engineering, right? But nobody talks about the social engineering that segregated our neighborhoods in the first place, okay? Because that was the actual social engineering. We sometimes hear that, communities of color got that way because all the Black folks just want to live next to each other and they don't want to have nice things. And, they just put
Right.
trash on the street and they can't do anything differently. Or all
Yes.
the brown folks wanted to live next to each other, right?
Uh-huh.
And they don't want to live in any other neighborhoods. Now, certainly, sometimes Black folks do want to live around other Black folks. I would say I'm probably in that camp, right? When I've had the opportunity to make decisions about where I live, I have typically chosen to live in historically Black communities. However, right, we know that how did we get communities that are historically Black?
Mhm.
Because of this kind of social engineering, right, that we're thinking about oftentimes. Of course, we had some communities that were diverse and, racially mixed prior to the time of redlining. But generally speaking, right, we're not really clear and we don't really talk about the ways in which people were placed into certain communities and how that led to the outcomes that they're seeing. I think often about the story of the Clotilda, right, down in Mobile, Alabama.
Mhm.
I know folks from Mobile, Alabama who grew up there, who grew up knowing the story of the last ship that imported Black Africans to the United States for the purpose of enslaving them.
Slavery. Yes.
And they grew up hearing, well, that's an
Mhm.
urban legend. We're just not sure, right, that actually took place. And now that the remains of the Clotilda have been found, people are having their experiences validated. And
Mhm.
so to me, that truth telling and that validation is the first step toward justice. And so when I think about what justice means, I think justice means a full recognition and some accountability, and then actions that are designed to address and repair, right, the harm that was caused. And so that's what justice means to me. And I hope that is what we are bringing here at the redress movement.
John, did you want to add anything to what you think justice?
My answer is very short, and it's been this way for some time. So, but as an organizer, in um, in the case of what we're speaking about right now, it
Mhm.
will be it will be what North Omaha feels is justice.
I like
And
that.
you know,
Mhm.
and just ensuring people have a process to where they could speak about the targets or the type of organizing that they want to see and be a part of in North Omaha. But, real simple to me is when we talk justice, I mean, we're just talking freedom. We're fighting because we still don't have freedom.
Mhm.
Uh, and I believe that, um, you know, for everything that my ancestors experienced, everything that we're benefiting from in this country, that the descendants of those folks and and everything should be able to live where we want to live, eat where we want to eat, go where we want to go, work where we want to work without, any more obstacles of bias put in front of us.
I wanted to ask you, because the healing, we all have ideals of healing. And I like this definition. We believe that our country needs the space to heal from the intentional harms created in past policies, systems, practice, and disinvestment. And I think that last part is that disinvestment is what has happened. As John, you have seen what's North Omaha has been disinvested for so long. And although we have supposed to have this fund, this 1024, this money is going to be invested, but it still is going to take more than that. And you made a statement, John, when you said what North Omaha wants as justice. Would that be true for healing? Do you feel that, or how do you feel about what is needed as healing?
I can't speak to, I feel like I know what I need for healing, but I can't tell you what you need for healing, right? My job is to create spaces for us to figure that out and then work towards making that happen. So, and as we go around, as I travel around, a lot of what people are saying for healing is some of the same things. But I also think that as we begin to actually create those mechanisms, we'll continue to grow and realize more of what healing looks like as we travel that road.
I would like to ask you, Ms. Hill, that when you talk about ground truthing, and as your statement says, you believe that it's any healing that occurs, but before that, we have to face the facts of history and ground truth solutions that are aligned with that history. How do you think what is going on in our society now with and down like in Florida? And what I've been telling people here on my programs and when I speak is just like, just because you want to say, well, it's not here what the governor's doing, it's there in Florida. No, it is everywhere. It's right here. And how can you do this if the true history is not being told? Or how do you see how can the redress movement help to be able to give that the facts of history and the truth is aligned with the history? How can you see this happening if the truth about the history isn't being told?
Well, and I think, that is the $1 million question, right? Because we really are living in a time where we are asked to pretend that things that happened haven't happened, or that things that do exist don't exist. And we are being asked to do that. And not only are we being asked, right, but in many communities, folks are being forced to do that. And so
Florida.
Florida, Wisconsin, okay, I mean, Alabama, when we think about the ways in which people are just stripped systemically and systematically and purposely and intentionally of their right to vote. Okay, that's not just happening in Georgia and Alabama and in Mississippi. That's happening in Wisconsin. Look at what is going on there in terms of the gerrymandering, right? Where you can have a majority of folks voting for people who represent their interests, but then the legislature doesn't look like that because it's gerrymandered such that one party is winning either way, right? Even when they don't win the majority of voters or the majority of mindsets, right? And so that's what we have to be very clear about. There is a reason that we are being asked to continue to absorb lies. It's not mistake. It's not a difference of opinion.
No.
There are not differences of opinions about actual facts and things that happened, right? The barriers that Black and brown folks face, those are facts. It's not there's no opinions about, or there's no both sides as to whether lending discrimination exists, right? There's no both sides or a difference of opinion as to whether policies that exclude people who have arrests or convictions in their backgrounds, whether those policies disproportionately impact people of color. There's no question or both sides or differences of opinions about these kinds of things. Whether or not Black folks were enslaved and the impacts still continue today, there's no question about that. And so we are being asked and told in many communities that we have to absorb lies. We have shifted things so much that we are being asked now to consider the impact, right? The traumatic impact that hearing Black and brown people's stories will have on white children. And we're having that conversation as if ignoring the experiences of Black and brown people doesn't have an impact on Black children. We're so concerned about the experience of white children hearing about things that their ancestors actually did. But are we considering Black and brown children in these conversations at all?
Exactly.
We're not, right? And so much of what we are being asked to do and hear and take in and internalize is just not actually correct or factual. And so we are going to be working from a place where we are telling the truth about history, about what has happened. And, you know, I think to John's point around what communities want to see, we can never get there if we're not operating from a place of shared understanding and from a place of honesty that is radical, right? And so the work that we do is grounded in truth and it is grounded in facts.
You know, you brought out a point that that I have said so many times, like there's been individuals with our school system and they have been, how shall I say, beat down so, or they don't know. If you don't know what that problem is, you can't go and ask the questions because you don't know what it is that you should ask. I mean, we've had parents who have been banned from going to the teachers' administration building because they went. And not because they were belligerent or anything, it's because they asked the questions. How are you in your movement going to work to get that to help? And I guess, John, like you're saying that what North Omaha wants, but how does North Omaha know what they want if there's no one who's really brought out, as you just stated, Cassandra, about knowing the history, knowing the true facts? What's the mechanism, I guess? How are we going to be able to address that?
So, we pride a lot of our organizing on being led by the community, but leadership development, turning more people into organizers, equipping people with that truth, because it's easy to say those words, equipping people with that truth, but all of us on this call knows that when we were instilled with the truth, it was this big, bold, affinity for justice that rose up in us, right? Like when your eyes begin to open and you realize that you've been seeing things through a lens that was not created by you, and you may not have even been thinking about yourself. It awakens you in a way to want to do something, the same way that I was describing that Richard Rothstein awakened that room of realtors to say, what can we do, right? But I think with a lot of us in our communities, when we begin to feel that way, like there's so much reflecting under years of just miseducation, and that we think about, and then we kind of come out of that. But then, we go from there in mobilizing people into strategizing And sometimes that means strategizing relationships first. Before we even get into the deep organizing with the process between targets and things like that, sometimes it's coming to an understanding with one another so that we can actually have that unity to move forward. And then once we identify whatever targets that we want to be able to go after, it's true. It'll be a truly sustainable group, because that's what we want to build. We want to build sustainable movements. We don't want to do a moment to where we come in, we do something wonderful, and then you kind of never hear about any type of redress again. Redress is an ongoing movement that, takes place because, we're dealing with 400, 500 years of bias laws, bias systems, many of the things that Kashana has already spoken on. But in order to truly empower folks and bring them up to a level that they desire, it's going to take some time and consistent movement. And that's what we're here to do.
Cassandra, you brought out 2 points, and I would like to have you speak on it a little bit more. One was, how are you planning, or how can this movement address the issue? As you said, you've got to teach them or get them to understand it isn't they did something wrong. Because, a lot of times right now you hear when you talk about one of the things they want to be careful because they don't want the kids to grow up to have this hate and everything, is because they didn't do anything wrong. How do you address that to help get people to come to the table and understand it's not whether you did something wrong, it's that something was done wrong. How do we correct it?
Well, Ms. Cheryl, I'm gonna give you 2 answers. Okay, so the first answer is the honest answer. And I, this is actually a hard question for me, because when I hear that, first I'm wondering, well, are there a generation of white kids who really are going home brokenhearted and thinking I'm terrible because my ancestors did this? I'm not sure that that's actually true. Second of all, I think that's a red herring, right? I think it's a distraction from what the actual issue is. Now, here's the answer that I give that is not attached to my own personal feelings, right? And the answer is this: it's undisputed and cannot be denied that the benefits, right, of money that someone's family made 3, 4 generations ago, 100 years ago, that benefit of that money that was made continues to flow, right? Whether we're talking about 100 years later, whether we're talking about 60 years later, it continues to flow. Warren Buffett's children, grandchildren won't be poor, right?
Correct.
So that's undisputed. We know that. And so it's clear that people continue to benefit from the actions that people before them took. And so if we know that wealth and the benefits of accruing wealth continues to flow, why do we all of a sudden start denying that the impacts of racism and discrimination and slavery continue to flow? Why do we deny that? And so that's how I answer that question, right? We need to take it away from, and take the conversations away from feelings of individuals, and just look honestly, right, at the way the world works.
Correct.
I have friends that I, went to law school with, whose grandfathers had started a law firm. And so they knew that when they graduated from law school, they would have a job, right? And so again, the benefits flow. And so why are we going to pretend that detriments and effects from discriminatory systems don't also continue to follow along the generations?
Correct. I agree with you on that. The other point, because I don't want to run out of time here, but you and I've never looked at it in this term, but I'm going to be looking at it now, is when you said social engineering. If you could expound upon that a little bit more, is the areas that social engineering has been. And so I heard somebody say one time, if I said I'm going to use it. They say, don't say you're going to steal it. Just say you're going to use it. So I'm telling you right now, I'm going to use it. Okay, I got that.
And you absolutely should. That term has become it's a talking point, right?
Mhm.
And kind of a dog whistle. It's language that is often used by folks who want to conjure up some fear, who want to scare people, right? It is a term that is used to make, frankly, white suburbanites feel that people of color are coming to make their communities
Yes.
unsafe. And we heard a lot of that language during the last presidential administration. And so that
And you're still
language,
hearing it now. I don't mean to interrupt, but
to
you
be
gotta.
clear,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're still hearing that. And so very often when we start talking about opening communities up for more equitable access, and when we start talking about building and supporting open and integrated, right, vibrant communities, then we start hearing from the people who have benefited from these discriminatory systems. We start hearing, well, that's social engineering. And it's not going to work, right, to deny remedies for something that happened, to artificially create communities of color or segregated communities. It's not going to work to deny that system of social engineering and then say, well, unfortunately, we're not going to be open to remedies because that would be social engineering. That's disingenuous.
I like that. Well, like I said, I'm not one who tells, I don't like to say exaggerates the truth or lies, but I'm going to use it. I ain't going to borrow it. I ain't going to rent it. I'm just going to outright use it.
Well, and I think you should. And let me just say one last thing, if I may, Ms. Cheryl. We can't talk about sort of the creation of segregated communities that were choked off and starved of investment without linking that, right, to the history of displacement of indigenous folks, right? And
Correct.
so we know that social engineering and moving, the mass removal of people and placing them on other lands, right, is something that is as old as the founding of this country.
Correct.
And so we have continued to implement, or people who have power and who control the levers of power in this country have continued to socially engineer communities because
Definitely.
they themselves want to have access to those lands. And so we have to be very clear about where the social engineering has actually occurred, right? Typically speaking, our indigenous family hasn't chosen to be located on reservations, right? We weren't typically choosing to be placed in communities. This is what happened, right? Because of the desire to have access to those lands. And so we have to be clear about where the real social engineering took place when it comes to housing policy in this country.
It's perfect, which I'm doing another program on, and it fits right in North Omaha. They use social engineering back in the 80s or late 70s to the 80s when they put the interstate directly and down our North Omaha, where we had businesses, churches, schools, and everything. That was social engineering, but we didn't call it that then. But now we have a name for it. So I can, like I said, my next program on North Omaha doesn't get a break. That's what I'm going to talk about, is how that social engineering was used when they put that interstate straight down through our part of town that they put us to, in a sense, because they redlined it, and then they had the white flight. So they use that. We've got a few minutes left, and I'd just like to, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to both of you. I have truly enjoyed speaking with you. And my goal is, and hopefully I'm going to work on it. Probably maybe I can get you guys, because John, you said you were at a program where an event where Richard Rothstein spoke. And so I'm trying to work to see if I could get him. And then it'd be great if he does come, we could have you two come, because I think it would be perfect. But I'm going to work on that. And until I've told flat no, I still think it's possible. I believe all things are possible through the Man Club. So, but I want to end this with give you both opportunity if there's anything that you would like to comment on or speak about. And I'm really looking forward to hoping that Omaha, Nebraska will be able to become part of the redress movement. So I'll just turn it over to you guys, John, and then I'm gonna let Miss give her the last word. We women got to stick together.
Miss Cheryl, this is just a pleasure that we've gotten to this point that we've talked a number of times, and like we're continuing to run along the same track along with a number of other respected leaders in North Omaha. So, honestly, I'm just appreciative for your time and inviting us up here, and just glad to be on something that folks in North Omaha and other parts of Omaha will be able to hear. And, all I can just say is that we're working to solidify our presence there, and hopefully you will be seeing us soon.
And I'll also add, just thank you again for having us today. And it's been so exciting to hear about the interest in Omaha for this work. And so that is so exciting and so inspiring. And I'm inspired by the interest, for sure, that the folks in Omaha have. I think John and I are both clear, right, about how Omaha gets down, and we are clear that folks are aware of what is going on and are looking, right, to engage in this work. And so we so appreciate that. And as John mentioned, we're doing our best to come there and to join in to the efforts that are taking place in that community. And so we just are thankful again that you allowed us to be here today.
Oh, yes.
We look
my
forward
pleasure
to doing this work in Omaha for sure.
It's my pleasure. And then I just going to end on this note is you didn't lose too many cases. I sure wouldn't want, if I was an attorney, I don't want to be in that courtroom with you.
Well,
you
I
are the
appreciate
litigator,
that.
So I don't want to be in that room with you.
I gotta say, I'm good at it. I'm good at it.
Hey, girlfriend,
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
No, you deserve it. And as John has said, we've had conversations, and I'm not the type to say something just to be saying it or to butter you up. I just not say anything before I'm gonna do that. But I already come across, I'm like, woo, I don't want to be in that. I don't want to go across that table with that sister. No, and I will say this to your board. I believe they couldn't have got a better person. You are the one to be that executive director.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for your time. And this is not going to be the last. And you are welcome to come on here anytime. Just let me know if you want to come on and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. Our show is open to you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. So
thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.